So debate, especially in this tradition, right? Debate is a very essential aspect. For example, if you see in a monastic system, we might have 2 or 3 classes of 1 hour or 1.5 hour philosophy a week, you know? That's it. For the rest, every day, hours of debate. So in Western context, if you see how it's been done in centers, we have like a few hours of lecture and 1 hour discussion, right? So it's slightly different. But the discussions help. But because if you talk about the material and you analyze the material, you get more clarity and it stays longer. You retain the material much better. That's one of the benefits of debating or discussing things. There are a few pilot projects already going on of Westerners studying debate in English, right? So it's happening. Yeah? You just have to invest a little bit of time into it, because if you really want to get the benefit out of a debate, you have to memorize certain kind of terms and the definitions and be very familiar with the material, because there's no way you bring a book to the debate courtyard. Everything has to come from the mind. And that kind of process now we're seeing in certain centers, Lama Tsongkhapa Institute and Nalanda in France, for example, they already starting with projects that people start to see the structure of debate, which is important. Because why is it important? Because most of the things we study, even in the Western centers, the text, the traditional texts, are based on the debate format. So if you miss out on that debate format, you miss out certain aspects of the explanation, right? So that means for that purpose it can be great benefit. And then if you put a little bit more time and effort to actually be more sharp and to be more clear and to remember the material, retain the material better, debate is amazing. His Holiness Dalai Lama once says, of course, doing Manjushri practice, right, saying the Arapatana mantra increases wisdom, right? That's definitely true. But His Holiness says, if you compare a Manjushri retreat for a month or 2 months compared to debate for a month or 2 months, if you get increased wisdom with the Manjushri debate or not is doubtful. If you debate for 1 or 2 months, guaranteed, your wisdom will increase. So that means that, of course, Manjushri has an uncommon blessing, right? But to train the mind in this kind of way of using epistemology and sharpness, you can see there's definitely great benefit in analyzing the material. So in debates, then what you do on a daily basis, you read the root text, you meet the commentaries, you attend some teachings, so you have some idea about the interpretations of more difficult kind of sections in the text. So you have an idea what that particular topic is all about. So you sit down and somebody asks you the interpretation of this and this point, right? So for example, what is the nature of ultimate reality, right? So you say everything is empty of inherent existence. And then he asks why. You say because everything is in nature of the interdependence. Right? So that means because everything is in nature of dependent origination, that proves everything is in nature of emptiness, meaning everything is empty of inherent existence. Nothing exists from its own side. Right? So then that's a very simplified form of the logic. But then in the debate style, then it goes a little bit more deeper. You know, what does that mean, inherent existence? What does that mean, dependent origination? What are the levels? So you can go deeper and deeper and deeper. And then the more detailed it becomes, the more interpretations that are possible, right? And then it can be the case that you think you understood it and you give the answer, but then your classmates, and especially the ones sitting on the side, they say, "Oh, this is going the wrong direction. I have to correct him." And then they get up and they fire the different forms of logic, and then you can completely contradict yourself after some time. So debate itself is a very good practice for the ego as well. Not next to clarifying certain aspects of the teaching. So it's a kind of a structure of logic and reasoning and scriptural reference. So you use the scriptural reference as the basis, and then with logic and reasoning you analyze if it's the case or not, and why so. So in the debates then there's kind of scriptural reference and there's reasoning. But reasoning is mostly the most important aspect, right? Because scriptural reference, you will see there are various scriptural references were not exactly the same, especially if you combine the different tenet systems. Different scriptures say different things, and you have to analyze why is that so. So that's why reasoning is actually much more important than mere scriptural reference. And that's why logic is so incredibly important in this tradition. As the Buddha himself said, don't accept my words because I'm a respected person. You should analyze my words like you analyze gold, by breaking it, rubbing it down and melting it. Meaning using the various forms of valid cognition, using the various forms of reasoning to see if it's true what I'm saying or not.